The 1960s, a decade of change and hope. Air travel, once a luxury, was becoming accessible to the common man. Families could soar above the clouds. Businessmen could traverse continents in hours. The world seemed to shrink. Borders felt less relevant. However, this era of progress would soon be marred by a terrifying new phenomenon: hijackings. The advent of widespread air travel brought an unprecedented challenge, ensuring passenger safety. Airport security was in its infancy. Screening procedures were rudimentary. This lack of stringent security created a dangerous loophole. Extremist groups recognized the potential of airplanes as tools for terror. The world watched in disbelief as reports of the first hijacking surfaced. The skies, once a symbol of possibility, now carried a palpable sense of vulnerability. As the 1960s progressed, hijackings became alarmingly regular. Newspapers were filled with accounts of these audacious crimes. The motives behind these hijackings were varied: political ideologies, personal vendettas, or a desire for notoriety. The impact was undeniable. The world held its breath as each drama unfolded. Every commercial flight became a gamble, a roll of the dice. The golden age of aviation was now tainted by fear. March 29, 1969, dawned like any other day at Leonardo da Vinci Fiumicino Airport in Rome. Among the many flights was TWA Flight 85, a routine service from Rome to Tel Aviv. The Boeing 707 stood gleaming on the runway. Passengers, a mix of excitement and anticipation, made their way through the terminal. Captain Robert Wilbur and First Officer Harold Wheaton went through their pre-flight checks. The atmosphere inside the cabin was a mix of nervous energy and quiet anticipation. Destination Tel Aviv, a flight filled with hope and anticipation. For many passengers, Tel Aviv held special significance. Families returning home, businessmen seeking opportunities, tourists eager to explore. The flight was more than just a journey. It was a bridge connecting cultures. Passengers were united by a shared sense of purpose. Little did they know their journey would take an unexpected and terrifying turn. Faces in the crowd. The passengers and crew of TWA Flight 85. In the first-class cabin, Mr. and Mrs. Goldberg, an elderly couple from New York City, settled into their seats. In the economy section, a young American backpacker named Sarah, her journal filled with notes and sketches. Near the back, flight attendants made their final preparations. In the cockpit, Captain Wilbur and First Officer Wheaton completed their pre-flight checks. They were responsible for guiding this metal bird and its precious cargo through the skies. A disruption in the skies, the moment everything changed. The hum of the engines provided a constant lullaby. Then, without warning, a sudden commotion shattered the tranquil atmosphere. Two men, their faces contorted in grim determination, pushed through the passengers. The glint of metal and the soft cabin light sent a collective gasp through the plane. The impossible had become a terrifying reality. TWA Flight 85 was under the control of hijackers. Faces of terror, unveiling the hijackers' sinister agenda. The two figures barked orders at the terrified passengers and crew. Mahmoud Isa, the elder, headed towards the cockpit. His younger accomplice began herding the passengers into a tight group. They were members of the Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. Their demands were relayed to the captain with chilling clarity: a change of course to Damascus, Syria. A cockpit under siege. The pilot's harrowing encounter. The chilling announcement crackled through the cockpit speakers. Captain Wilbur and First Officer Wheaton exchanged a look of silent acknowledgement. The voice on the other end was cold, insistent. They were to change course immediately to Damascus, Syria. The lives of everyone on board rested on a knife's edge. Section 4, paralyzed by fear, the passengers struggle for composure. The initial shock gave way to a chilling realization. They were trapped, their lives hanging precariously. The air crackled with tension, thick with unspoken fear. Mothers clutched their children close, whispering prayers and reassurances. Husbands and wives exchanged tight-lipped glances, seeking solace. The silence was punctuated by muffled sobs and frantic prayers. Some stared blankly ahead, struggling to comprehend the situation. Others wept openly, their bodies racked with sobs. Flight attendants, faces betraying fear, moved among passengers, trying to maintain order. They offered words of comfort, their voices trembling. They distributed water, a small gesture of humanity. Time warped as the hijacked aircraft veered off course. Every creak and change in engine pitch sent fresh waves of panic. They were suspended between hope and despair, their fate a bargaining chip. The atmosphere inside the hijacked aircraft crackled with tension. Every rustle of clothing, every whispered word seemed amplified. The passengers of TWA Flight 85, their faces etched with apprehension, sat huddled together. Behind that thin barrier, a high-stakes game of diplomacy and desperation was unfolding. Captain Wilbur maintained a fragile line of communication with the hijackers. He relayed their demands to the authorities on the ground. Every crackle of static heightened the sense of urgency. On the ground, negotiators worked tirelessly to establish a rapport with the hijackers. They listened intently to the demands, searching for any common ground. The hijackers remained steadfast in their demands. The diversion to Damascus was non-negotiable. They demanded refueling upon arrival. The world watched and waited, praying for a miracle. As the hours turned into an excruciatingly long day, the initial shock began to give way to a grinding sense of despair. The air inside the cabin, heavy with the weight of fear and uncertainty, grew stale and thick. The passengers, their bodies aching from the cramped conditions, their spirits worn down by the relentless tension, struggled to maintain a semblance of hope amidst the growing darkness. Tempers flared as patience wore thin, the close confines of the aircraft amplifying every sigh, every rustle of clothing. Small acts of kindness, a shared bottle of water, a reassuring touch became lifelines, small beacons of humanity flickering in the face of barbarity. Mothers comforted their children, whispering stories of courage and resilience, their voices trembling slightly as they fought back their own tears. The hijackers, their initial bravado giving way to fatigue, paced the aisles, their eyes darting suspiciously at the passengers. Their fingers never strayed far from their weapons, a constant reminder of the precariousness of the situation. The threat of violence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, a palpable presence that seeped into every corner of the hijacked aircraft. Outside the plane, the world watched and waited, transfixed by the unfolding drama. News reports crackled over radios and televisions, bringing updates from the scene, each piece of information, however small, offering a glimmer of hope in the face of despair. Families of the hostages gathered at airports, their faces etched with worry, their hearts breaking with each passing hour, their prayers a desperate chorus echoing across continents. As the sun began its slow descent, casting long shadows across the tense cabin, Captain Wilbur's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing that the hijackers had agreed to release women and children in Damascus. A collective sigh of relief and apprehension swept through the cabin. Mothers clutched their children close. The decision to release them offered a faint glimmer of hope, a sign that humanity could prevail. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the Syrian desert in a long, ominous shadow, TWA Flight 85 made its descent into Damascus International Airport. The runway lights guided the hijacked aircraft towards its destination. The wheels touched down with a thud, amplified by the tense silence inside the cabin. Passengers exchanged apprehensive glances. Outside, Syrian soldiers surrounded the aircraft, their presence a stark reminder of the volatile situation. Damascus, a city accustomed to the ebb and flow of history, found itself thrust onto the world stage. With the aircraft under the watchful eyes of Syrian authorities, a tense standoff ensued. The hijackers, their bravado diminished, remained barricaded inside the plane with hostages. The Syrian government faced international pressure to resolve the situation peacefully. Progress came with the release of women and children. They descended the aircraft's stairs, faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. As the hours ticked by, the initial hope that had flickered with the release of the women and children began to dwindle. The hijackers, their demands unmet, grew increasingly agitated, their behavior unpredictable. The fragile peace that had been brokered seemed to be unraveling, the situation threatening to spiral out of control. Mahmoud Isa, his eyes bloodshot, his voice hoarse from shouting, paced the aisle of the plane, his hand never straying far from the grenade he now held, its cold metal a chilling reminder of the stakes. He railed against Israel, his words a venomous diatribe fueled by years of anger and resentment, his rage palpable, his desperation growing with each passing moment. Then, with a chilling clarity that sent a collective shudder through the aircraft, he issued his ultimatum. The plane, he declared, would be blown up, a fiery sacrifice to their cause, a symbol of their unwavering commitment to the Palestinian struggle. His words, echoing through the silent cabin, were met with stunned disbelief. Terror, raw and visceral, gripped the passengers, their worst fears realized. The world, watching the drama unfold through the lens of the international media, held its breath. Negotiators, their faces etched with concern, pleaded for calm, their voices a desperate attempt to reason with a man seemingly hell-bent on destruction. The clock was ticking, each second drawing them closer to a catastrophic climax, a tragedy that threatened to claim the lives of innocent passengers and forever stain the conscience of a world struggling to comprehend the depths of human despair and the deadly consequences of unchecked fanaticism. A test of wills, the negotiators' race against time. News of the hijackers' chilling ultimatum reverberated around the globe. The fate of TWA Flight 85 and everyone on board hung in the balance. Inside the command center, negotiators worked feverishly, their faces illuminated by monitors. Time was their most precious commodity, each second ticking away. The eyes of the world were upon them, their actions setting a precedent. Bravery under fire, a captain's unwavering resolve. While negotiators grappled with demands, Captain Robert Wilbur faced an unimaginable test. Trapped in his cockpit, surrounded by fear, he became a beacon of hope. Every radio crackle, every tense exchange, he walked a tightrope. His voice connected the terrified souls on board to hope. Despite immense pressure, he never lost sight of his duty. He drew strength from their silent faith in him. His actions could mean the difference between life and death. Captain Wilbur embodied the essence of courage and determination. As the hours ticked by and the sun began its final descent, casting long shadows across the tarmac at Damascus International Airport, the fate of TWA Flight 85 and the souls on board hung precariously in the balance. The air crackled with tension, every minute stretching out into an eternity as the world watched and waited, hoping against hope for a peaceful resolution to the crisis. Inside the aircraft, the atmosphere was thick with fear and anticipation. Passengers huddled together, their faces pale and drawn, their every breath a prayer whispered into the heavy silence. The hijackers, their nerves frayed by the prolonged standoff, their initial bravado replaced by a volatile mix of desperation and fatigue, paced the aisles, their eyes darting suspiciously, their fingers never straying far from their weapons. The negotiators, their voices hoarse from hours of pleading and cajoling, refused to give up hope. They had established a fragile line of communication with the hijackers, a tenuous thread, connecting them to the possibility of a peaceful resolution. They appealed to their sense of humanity, reminding them of the innocent lives at stake, their words a beacon of reason in the face of unreasoning terror. Then, in a heart-stopping moment that seemed to stretch on for an eternity, a breakthrough. Whether swayed by the negotiators' pleas, their own exhaustion, or a flicker of doubt in their hearts, the hijackers agreed to release the remaining hostages in exchange for safe passage out of Syria. A collective sigh of relief swept across the globe as news of the agreement spread like wildfire. The air was thick with relief and disbelief as the last of the hostages disembarked TWA Flight 85, their steps hesitant, their bodies weary, their faces etched with a mixture of joy and lingering trauma. Tears of joy streamed down the faces of family members as they embraced their loved ones. But the joy of reunion was tinged with the sobering realization that the journey back to normalcy would be long and arduous. The scars of the hijacking, both visible and invisible, ran deep, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace and the ever-present threat of violence. The world watched as the hostages began their slow and painful journey towards healing. The hijacking of TWA Flight 85 sent shockwaves across the globe, its impact reverberating far beyond those directly affected. Governments and aviation authorities scrambled to reassess their security protocols. The incident marked a turning point, ushering in heightened security measures at airports worldwide. Metal detectors became commonplace, a reminder of the ever-present threat. Baggage screening procedures intensified, transforming the check-in process. The hijacking forced the world to confront the reality that the battle against terrorism had extended to the skies. In the aftermath of the hijacking, the world grappled with a profound question: how to prevent such a terrifying event from happening again. The answer lay in fortifying the skies, transforming aviation security from reactive to proactive. The legacy of TWA Flight 85 is one of resilience and innovation. The years that followed witnessed a paradigm shift in aviation security. Airports underwent massive overhauls with new technologies deployed to detect threats. The Armed Air Marshal program added another layer of protection. The hijacking served as a catalyst for positive change in the aviation industry.